Hi friends, I'm going to be filming a walkthrough of my 2025 journal, my commonplace, and my Luis Carmen journal, as well as a techo kaigi, or my thoughts on what worked and what didn't, and my lineup for 2026, as well as some of my 2026 layouts that I have pre-made. So the first thing I'm going to start with is going to be my Lila journals tulip journal in the A5 size. I bought this last year and I think it'll last me through this year because I didn't have a ton of entries. I had a lot going on last year with moving homes, and journaling kind of fell off just a tiny bit, but I did kind of catch up toward the end of the year. So I have my Lila journals tulip journal A5, and then some of the information I'm probably going to cover because it's just personal to me, but I really loved just kind of the little front page that it offers. I included the sticker with my name from when I bought it from my packaging. I like to print out a vision board each year at the front of my journal, and this kind of showcased some of my 2025 goals. So goals are just, experiences that I wanted to focus on. I had noted Spanish. I absolutely love fountain pens, and I wanted to start growing my collection. Wanted to focus on commonplacing, drink less coffee, drink more matcha, focus on practicing sticking with my goals, photography, reading, making. So I loved my little 2025 vision journal. I just printed these out on sticker paper at home. And then some of these layouts I got from Mochi Bujo. I absolutely love her journal entries, and hers are really intricate. And I tend to have a little bit more of a simplistic style, but I really liked her future log, and I went ahead and copied this over. So this was a 2-pager, which I've changed a little bit for this year, but I just went ahead and input any of my important dates, birthdays I wanted to remember, anything like that throughout the entire year. And then another layout that I kind of took from her, which I'll cover up some of my information maybe this way, is focusing on tracking my health and the different appointments that I have to make. So I have space for any doctor's visits that are recurring that I want to schedule, and my notes from them so that I can remember them. And then on this page, I'll just move this over ever so slightly. I also borrowed from her because I liked it, which I thought this page turned out so cute. I had some of the packaging from my tulip journal when it came in, some different little peon stickers, but just tracking my menstrual cycle so I can look at any irregularities for when I go into doctor's appointments. So I'll keep that info to myself, but you get the idea of the layout. And then I had this nice goal of having a monthly review every single month, and I started off strong. I wanted to kind of recap what I was reading, anything that I was watching at the time, movies, etc. And I kept up with it for a little bit. I thought maybe for each month I could have a recap, which would be a double spread. And then I could also do something like maybe a diary entry, 1 line a day. I was practicing writing these in Spanish at the time since I'm taking Spanish lessons. And I wanted to track some of my habits monthly. So some of these included like working out, my vitamins, if I was eating breakfast and lunch, drinking enough water, if I was practicing my Spanish, and if I was reading. Reading I ended up taking out because I read every night. So I wanted to track my steps, so that's been an important one. But I did notice that I wasn't really keeping up with these diary entry pages, and I kind of fell off with tracking some of the habits. So I have my February overview. I thought this was cute with kind of the Valentine's Day theme, tracked what I was reading and watching. And you'll notice that my diary entries start to kind of taper off, so I didn't really keep up with that. At the end of every month, I would go back and add in my steps, so that was probably my most consistent tracking metric. For March, I decided to condense down just to a dual spread where I have my review and then the habits that I'm tracking, and March is really where I fell off with tracking those extra habits, but I still kept up with tracking my steps, and I like seeing that information so I can focus on movement. April and May started to get a little busier since we were putting our house up for sale. So between April and August, things were pretty crazy. In April, I decided I wanted to see if I could track my screen time. Something that's unfortunate is that with an iPhone, I am able to see my screen time data, but it doesn't seem to have an archive that I can access past maybe 7 days. And so I really have to catch it in the moment, and I'm maybe not as consistent with doing that as I would like. But so for this month, I added in tracking kind of in terms of hours or 1,000 steps, what my screen time was. In April, it was really high daily, and I've been trying to bring that down. But I have taken that metric out. In May, I caught back up on doing some of my recaps with what I was reading, just some personal reflection and checking in, anything that I was liking lately. Still had screen time at the top, had my June spread. In July, I didn't track any of my recap entries, but I did focus on adding back in my steps. Same thing for August. Again, we were moving homes, added in my steps after the fact. September, I started to pick up just a tiny bit. And I thought kind of bringing in some of my autumn decor and vibes was really fun with some of my stickers, my washi tape. October, a little bit slim, so journaling and having these recap pages was probably not my best last year, and that's okay, because it'll vary. November, mainly just steps. December, mainly just steps. And then I decided to do kind of an overall average of how active I was, so I can see which months I had more movement than other months. And I did a reflection overall on some of my health data. So based on visits with my doctor, based on just my own observations, where I wanted to make adjustments for the upcoming year. So I wanted to have that before I headed into 2026. I loved having a wrapped page, so I kind of noted what some of my top books were. I tried to narrow it down to 3 books, which was really hard, and then I had an honorable mention. So my top books of the year were The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig, The Encyclopedia of Fairies trilogy by Heather Fawcett, Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang, honorable mention, Catabasis, R.F. Kuang as well. In terms of movies, I think Nosferatu really set the tone for my year, so I was really kind of into that gothic setting with maybe a touch of horror. So I think probably my favorite movie of the year was Crimson Peak. So it's a little bit older, but Tom Hiddleston, and I'm forgetting the actress's name from Alice in Wonderland. She was in it as well as the female lead. And then Alice in Wonderland, the version by Tim Burton, Frankenstein, Emma, Little Women, so really was loving kind of period films. And then I put Nosferatu, not necessarily for the storyline, although the storyline is familiar, but not necessarily for the story in the movie itself, but I love the costuming and the cinematography. So overall it wasn't my favorite, but I love the setting and the tone and elements of the movie that kind of set the stage for my year. For music, I listened to a lot of Bad Bunny, Bomba Stereo, Drake, Ludovico, Einaudi, and Beethoven. So this came from my Spotify Wrapped, and so I went ahead and documented that in my journal. In terms of TV, I would say Hacks was my most outstanding show. Absolutely love everything about that show. I think it is comedic genius, and if you have HBO, you can stream it on there. But I really loved Hacks. I loved Fallout. Sandman, The Last of Us finally got another season, and then of course Stranger Things toward the end of the year. I watched a ton of YouTube. For some reason, I missed kind of my YouTube recap. I saw it one day, didn't get to take a screenshot of it, but I know the channels that I follow the most, and so I watched a lot of vlogs, a lot of journaling content, and then just spent a lot of my free time on YouTube, as you can see, because it had to continue on to the next page. And then I also wanted to document some of the topics that I've been obsessed with, so just kind of a wrapped for my interests and my obsession. So I was watching a lot of videos or reading a lot about nature photography, or just consuming a lot of that content on Instagram. I was playing with the idea of digital minimalism, and I have been coming back to this for about 10 years. I struggle kind of with that balance of how much I want to show up online or how much I want to spend my time online. And so I have more thoughts on that. Maybe I'll make another video on that. Ton of journaling content, so many amazing journaling creators out there. I could make a video just about some of those favorite channels that I have. I also watched and took in a lot of content about personal style, about reading and literature, and just reading lists and suggestions, reviews, book reviews, things like that. Pretty high up there was language learning content, so kind of looking at tips for becoming more fluent in a language, reading comprehension, some listening videos where you can kind of follow along in your target language and just have gentle practice. So they have them kind of at different levels, but maybe like vlogs in that target language. I was really interested in vocabulary and kind of highlighting throughout my books new terms that I hadn't come across before and looking those up so I could expand my own knowledge. I started to see and engage a lot with discourse on social media about analog living, or just returning more to physical media, and some of that is embodied through my wanting to focus on journaling more rather than having only online archives. And so I was reading and watching a lot about that, as well as commonplacing and kind of keeping all of that information that I find interesting to me in one common spot. So that was something that carried over from 2024 that I really enjoyed. And then toward the end of the year, I dove into gardening. So we hope to build a garden this year. We're planning on that. And so I bought some books on urban gardening, urban homesteading. And so that's something we're going to be implementing this year. Interior design, that's my favorite genre of coffee table books, or having physical inspiration. And so just returning to some of my physical books and flipping through them as we moved homes so that I could start thinking about what we were wanting to add to our new home in terms of design elements or any changes, paint colors, things like that. A lot of baking and cooking content, and then of course fountain pens and ink collections. Y'all, I watched a lot of hours of videos of just ink swatches, and I find it such soothing content to take in. And so I just really love seeing beautiful inks and seeing what other people have in their collections. I had a couple of extra pages once I was kind of nearing the end of the year. 2025 was the year that I broke down and bought a Louise Carmen leather journal cover, and I had it kind of on a wish list for over a year and decided to just go ahead and go for it. So it was little mementos from the packaging, what I ended up engraving on my journal. I bought a journal charm, which I'll continue adding to, but I got a journal charm from July Rose, and so I kept some of that sticker packaging and just wanted the homage to my Louise Carmen. Also kind of looking through some extra pages. I don't necessarily mind if there's blank space, but I had some that were just in awkward spots, and I was like, well, I'll just go ahead and document different things that come to mind. So since photography is one of my main hobbies, I wanted to note some of the materials that I had been coming back to, some of my lenses. I added one lens to my kit last year. That was everything that I did have and found myself using. On the next page, just super simple, I just made a quick list of things that I want to add to my kit. Why not? Filled up to 2 pages and was able to kind of plan ahead for what I might want to buy this year. I have been trying to buy a lot of my clothing secondhand, and so this spread was noting my favorite purchases from Depop or eBay or Poshmark throughout 2025. And so I sketched them out. I had fun with this, and so I kind of went through my closet, went through my orders on my phone, and noted the ones that I absolutely fell in love with, that I wore a lot, or that I was excited to have come in the mail. So I got a really fun cashmere and wool knit poncho. I found Elisa Seska smocked crop top last winter and wore the heck out of it this summer. It was in a bright marigold yellow color, and it's so cute. Toward the end of the year, I got a corduroy vest, which I have already worn maybe 3 times within 1 week alone going to work. I'm loving having vests and want to add more to my collection this year. Got a quilted jacket, so it was secondhand, but I saw that trend going around and it was really fun and cozy. Kind of has that grandma, grandpa aesthetic, and it's so sweet and whimsical, and I couldn't pass it up. I found a fun cable knit sweater on Poshmark that was a nice bubblegum pink color, 100% cotton, so it was really sensory friendly for me. I found a vintage Pendleton suit, a wool bias skirt from House of Brewer, a Scottish brand, heritage brand, and then added in a cashmere fisherman sweater from Quince. It was not secondhand, but it was a really good winter purchase to layer up with. And then I added in an honorable mention from 2024, which is a vintage leather suede maxi fringe skirt. I will have to show a video of how I've styled it, but it was absolutely one of my most worn pieces in 2025. I can kind of count it for 2025 because I purchased it late fall 2024. So she got a lot of love during the year. I kind of fell off with tracking some of this information, but I wanted to have at a glance what my reading stats were for 2025. So my books per month. Sometimes I'm a little hazy on when I finish a book. I'm trying to keep better notes on that. Have my totals. I was going to add in the pages that I can go in and backlog. I totally have no idea how much I bought and spent. It was a lot. And you know what? I don't even want to know. So I haven't filled in those columns. I have been trying to keep my receipts though. Some of my overall data, I tracked my average star rating, which I don't even know if I'm going to continue with star ratings because for me it feels kind of arbitrary. I either have the vibe of I enjoyed it, it was meaningful to me, or not even if I liked elements of it, but the story was meaningful to me, whether I liked the characters or the story or not. Maybe I'll drop star ratings in this next year, but I mostly read fantasy. I read one classic. I read books that were mostly in the 400 or 500 page range, a couple of longer ones this year as well, over 600 pages. Tracked the longest and the shortest, and then again, average rating 4.5. I feel like I'm really generous with my ratings. There were only a couple that I rated really poorly because I thought the writing was a little too much for me to get past. The quality was lacking. This spread I love and will continue. It's not super creative or pretty per se, but it's very practical. So this is just where I log all of the books that I'm reading. So I have my author title pages. I'm trying to track when I'm reading it, rating the genre. And this year in 2025, I included the status. So at the time I had a Kindle Unlimited subscription. So if I got it on through Kindle Unlimited, if I bought it as an ebook or a physical book, or maybe if I used the library for that book, I was tracking that format that I acquired the book through. I also wanted to print out my covers so I could have a visual of what I was reading. So in addition to just the written log, I wanted to see all of the pretty covers, and I love the aesthetic of it, and I think it's really fun. So my 2025 bookshelf spanned 2 pages. I wanted to make some cute little shelves, not get too intricate with it, but kind of make it like a little bookshelf system. So that's everything I read there. I had a random extra page. I actually need to add 2 more swatches. I wanted to track a little bit about my ink collection. So I have had during 2025 2 fountain pens, both Kaweco Sport, one in the Bordeaux, one in the Pitaya pink color. And then I had acquired Oxblood ink by Diamine Ink, and then a Ferris wheel press in like a nice sparkly kind of purpley pink. And then I also have a green and a chocolate brown, but I need to add them to this page. This was just books that I was hoping to read. As you can see, I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 from this list. So I don't know how well this list served me, but it was the intention was there. I wanted to read these. I was also hoping to become more active on social media. That'll probably be more of a this year goal, but I did have a little tracker where I did intend to see, how many followers I have and just kind of see how my growth develops over the year. I only tracked it twice, so I'm hoping that my spread is nicely filled in this year as I truly focus more on making video content. I love this spread. It's super simple. It wasn't even filled in a lot, but it was my anticipated releases for the year. So at the beginning of 2025, I did some research on what I was wanting to add to my reading list based on what was coming out. Last year was definitely the year of Onyx Storm from Rebecca Yarros. I have been looking forward to Immortal Consequences in the summer, Catabasis by R.F. Kuang in August. I kind of skipped around, oops, but The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig, Bare Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. And I need to kind of think about releases that are coming out for 2026, but I actually did read all of these. This one technically beginning of this year in January. And then don't read too closely if you don't want spoilers, but I did make some spreads for my top 3 reads. So The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig was absolutely my top favorite book. I included a little gargoyle for Bartholomew, one of my favorite characters, and I thought this spread turned out cute with the medieval focus and some of the armor and things like that. So my next favorite series was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I could go on and on about this, but I included just, some of my thoughts from the book, a little bit of a synopsis, and some of the quotes that stuck out to me. And then the Poppy War trilogy by far was one of my favorites, and you shouldn't look too closely, but just know that the Poppy War trilogy totally gutted me. It was beautifully written. It was infuriating at times. It was beautiful, and it reckons with some really tough concepts. I had noble intentions of tracking what I bought, and I was saving my receipts for a good portion of the year. I haven't totaled it up, but I was buying books pretty voraciously, but I tracked what I could, what I remember having receipts for, and I may or may not actually go back and total it up. All right, so now we arrive at my Techokaigi. So I have seen some videos kind of looking through reflections of what was working, what wasn't working, and made notes of the aspects that I wanted to continue in my 2026 spreads, things that I wanted to remove completely, and maybe some pages that I wanted to add for this next year. So overall, I wanted to find a better system for tracking my goals. I found that I was inconsistent with my monthly reviews. I'm probably not going to take those out because I know situationally I had a lot going on, so I would like to include them this year and just be a little bit more diligent about going back in and filling them in. I didn't use my 1 line a day in English or Spanish, so I'll probably discontinue that. I was inconsistent with tracking my book spot. I still would like to do that this year. I didn't use my social media tracker, but I'm still going to keep it because I'm wanting to put more intention into creating online content. And I didn't really use a series tracker, but there are a couple of series I plan on working my way through in 2026, so I'm still going to add in that spread. My future log was helpful, but I condensed it down into 1 page. Tracking sleep or screen time didn't really get the most use. I did like having my health tracker, my cycle log, my vision board, my reading log, my physical TBR list, some of those anticipated releases, tracking my monthly movement and step counts. I still want to track goals, but I want to find a new format for how I do that. And then I want to add in some pages just for my hobbies, for gardening, for different media. So I really closely track my books, but I would like to more so add in my music, my movies, my TV, the YouTube creators that I'm watching, so I have more data for the end of the year, and just keeping note of what I'm loving. This year I did want to add in some of those goals, but I saw people were making goal punch cards, and so I decided to make some of those, and I think they're super cute. And I wanted some spreads set aside for showcasing my favorite projects, so where I had spreads for my favorite books. If I'm sewing, I'm making things that turn out really well, I want to have some spreads dedicated just for noting which ones I really enjoyed or liked the outcome of. I like having secondhand versus new clothing and just kind of seeing what I'm bringing in, what I'm liking, what I'm actually wearing and getting use out of in my closet, with my favorite secondhand buys as well. And then I think I'll add in some spreads for just seasonal wish lists and just leave space for some fun spreads that just as they come up, I'll add them in. So I am keeping this same journal for 2026. And so I started off again with my vision board. So I kind of have that focus on making, on creating, on reading, on making videos, getting outside, maybe picking up knitting, sewing. Would really like to have some little chickens at some point this year. So we'll see how that goes. And I still have some room if I want to add in some others. I kept the future log, but I have gone ahead and just condensed it down into 1 spread instead of 2. I have my health log set up for the year, and then I track when I'm out sick so I can know how many times a year I'm getting sick. So I always keep that. If I'm taking off time from work for being out ill, I note it so I can just kind of see how my health is doing. And then I have my cycle tracker, And then these are some of my fun ones. So this year I wanted to make something creative for tracking some of my hobbies. So I have my little hobby wheel, which is just kind of the spokes or the areas that I want to focus on. So my areas were Spanish, journaling, photography, gardening, sewing, and woodworking, or just interior design in general, and making. And then of course I have reading, knitting, cooking, gaming. I have so many things I want to do in so little time, but I want to focus most of my attention there. My punch cards I thought were so fun, and I saw a lot of versions of them, so I made some of these with cardstock that I had, but I want to challenge myself to buy vintage and secondhand more. So if I'm buying vintage after 10 items, or secondhand after 10 items, I can indulge in a wish list item. From my physical reading list, I'm not going to let myself buy new books, physical books, or maybe even digital books, until I've read 5 physical books from my TBR. So I will make more cards as needed, completed one of those. For sewing, after I complete 10 projects, then I will reward myself with an embroidery machine, because that's something I want to add into my collection. After I build 5 projects, or make 5 things through maybe woodworking, I will add in maybe a new pattern or some type of tool. I really want to post to YouTube. This will be my first post, roughly 1 per month. Then I will add something to my gear that could make my content creation journey a little bit easier. With my wife, we're cooking together, and so once we learn 10 new different recipes from scratch that we haven't tried before, then we will go to Trader Joe's for a trip to get some new ingredients, because we both totally nerd out in Trader Joe's. And then my last one is moving my body. So if I want an extra book, I better get moving, because I made that my goal. I can get myself an extra book, or maybe have a little cafe day where I buy a book and go get a sweet treat. So here's how I'm gonna keep myself accountable, or just incentivize meeting some of those goals that I'm wanting to spend more time on. And then I have my recap pages. So I am gonna keep it just a single spread for each month. I have actually successfully filled in January. We'll see how I go. I tend to keep a sticky note of some of the things I'm doing, so I can go back in and fill in this information. So I already have pre-made February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. And then I've kind of mapped out. So I'll do another monthly average. I'll do another reflections over my health. I'll fill in those spreads later in 2026. I'll do my 2026 wrapped. I do have my reading goals. So for 2026, I am focusing more so on my physical TBR. So I've added in every physical book that I have not read that is in my collection, and kind of broken those out roughly by season. They're not equal by any means, but I have kind of assigned them a season based on vibes. And so one of my main goals is to get through my TBR. I just want to start working my way through them before amassing more books. I have my 2026 reading goals, which I might discuss more in depth in another video, but it was a cute little spread. I kind of made it like little tea bags and a teacup. I'll include my reading stats. I can't buy new books until I work my way through 5 from my physical TBR. I have my reading log. I've already kind of pre-entered 2 books that I'm currently reading, but I'm on my 5th book of the year. 2 are in progress. I still have writings, but I don't know if I'm going to continue with that. And then I have my bookshelf for the year, so I can go ahead and add in my book covers. Can't wait to see those shelves fill up. I have room for an extra bookshelf spread if I end up needing it. I have a new series tracker, so I did read The Courting of Bristol Keats and completed that duology this year, and will add those as I come across other books that are part of a series. I have some spreads set aside where I can make my top book reviews. Another social media tracker, so kind of looking at Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. I do have a website, so I could track views or popular pages or any notes that come there, but I just kind of keep it as a little bit of an online resume. So I hope to fill this in and be more active this year. And then I've tracked some video ideas, just big picture. Probably won't track my projects here, but just keeping note of things that I am drawn to talking about and that I would really like to make videos about. I want to add in a log for other forms of media, movies and TV, and then maybe focusing a little bit on gardening and some of those wish list items that I mentioned in my Tetrokagi. So at the end of the year, then I will recap over what spreads I ended up getting the most joy out of and the most use out of. And I do have some extra pages at the back, so I think that this should suit me through 2026. And if I fill it up, then I'll go ahead and buy a new journal. So thank you guys for hanging out, and then I think I'll make another video for my commonplace notebook and my Louise Carmen and kind of showcase how these parts of my system are used as well. So have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.